In this episode of Man vs. Marriage, it's live coaching with the Q-Dog and Coach Rita.
The podcast. How good do you want your life to be?
You gotta live on purpose, for a purpose.
It's truly about becoming the best version of yourself that's possible. This is Man vs. Marriage, the podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Man vs. Marriage. It is I, your humble servant, the Q-Dog, in the studio with...
Coach Rita.
Coach Rita in the hizzle for shizzle brizzle. Yo, before we get this whole thing kicked off and started, I want to remind you that you have a lifeline to Coach Rita and I, and it is coach at manvsmarriagepodcast.com. That's the email, coach at manvsmarriagepodcast.com. That's V like victory and S like success. So use it. Don't abuse it. I don't even know if that matters either. Just use it. And for those of you that are already using it, continue. And we are absolutely here. We're putting all my junk out. And that could sound wrong. That could sound really bad. We're not putting my junk out, but we're just opening me up more and more. It's another live coaching session that Coach Rita is really just helping me through with some of these things in life it's just life, right?
It's just life.
It's like everybody's got a life.
Yep.
So if I throw myself out there for the world to see, I think in my estimation, it's going to go a long way to help people. Whether they ever say anything or not, I know that there are lessons and perspective that you can gain from what I'm going through. And then hopefully you'll be candid enough and have the courage enough to share that with other people, because our goal is to really reform and redefine what you believe is possible about your marriage. Would you say that?
Yes.
And kind of reform and redefine what you think is possible for yourself. Because everybody I see tends to get stuck in a cycle, present company included, being me.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I want to talk about, since you gave me permission, said you would follow my lead.
I will.
Thank you. One thing I want to talk about is that Skinny Confidential episode of the Ed Milet podcast, you know.
Uh-huh.
And we've got a lot of really important, crazy life situations to get into, but I feel like it's just absolutely necessary that this is said. You know, why to even get into podcasts, you know, about your marriage? And, you know, we did episode 28, which is the why in Man versus Marriage.
Right.
And I think listening to that podcast is like, I don't know, maybe a lot of people do get into this thing because they are expecting, it's like a money first type situation. And that was never what was first for me. What was first for me is having a platform and a voice to help inspire and motivate people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what matters. That's the reason I'm crazy enough to take this stuff going on in my life and put it out forever for people to listen to.
Right.
And it struck a chord in me, you know, with what they were talking about. It's like, yeah, money comes down the road, but what matters the most right now is creating content that makes an impact on people's life.
Right.
And that sums me up as a person. I think, you know, that's written in my DNA somehow.
Mm-hmm.
It comes so naturally to me to want people to believe more and more and more in themselves.
Right.
And just, why don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we spend so much time second guessing ourselves? I spent a lot of time over the last 6-7 months second guessing who I am and what I bring to the table.
Right.
Why? And I took a step back and I looked and I said, a year and a half ago when you sat down, you know, to interview for what you wanted to do in
Right.
this part of your career you wanted to achieve. You're doing everything you said you were going to do. And why in the world would I second guess myself when I'm doing what I said I would do,
Mm-hmm.
and the results are there as proof positive? You know, so that if it's been a little while, I think, since you listened to it, what kind of takeaways did you have? Like, was there an aha moment there for you?
Yeah, I think a couple of them. If you guys do have the opportunity, listeners, if you have the opportunity to go, and Ed Milet interviewed in Skinny Confidential is what
Yeah.
their podcast handle is. And they were just talking about how they got into this whole podcast, how they just got into their whole thing that they're doing. And it's like what you said, most people get into podcasting. See, I don't know a lot about podcasting because you're the one that introduced it to me. So I really don't know the arena as well as, most people do. And most people do get into it for the money, for what it is that they can get out of it. I'm like you. I never even thought anything like that. I didn't even know there was money you could make in podcasting.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a platform to share your information, that you want to share. So, them just sharing and her, because she was the one that started it and just putting out information and different things that women would be interested in. And it is so true that my heart in this is, I see so many marriages and so many things happening in marriages. And for me, it's like, I'm in my 50s, and I think sometimes when you get older, you see things through a different filter, through a different light.
Sure.
And if I can take what I've learned and what I have experienced through sitting in front of people and coaching them or counseling them, and to be able to have that opportunity to share it with people, to be able to talk to that, like people say, what would you say to the 23-year-old, the one that was getting ready to walk down the aisle?
Yeah.
What would you do differently? What would you say differently? How would you address that? And that's me looking into this is having the ability to speak to all whether you're young, middle-aged, old couples, married, you're in a relationship, your other half, your better half, your soulmate, whatever relationship that you're in, is to look at it as a whole. And how can we, as a community of people, become the best of who we were created to be?
Yeah.
And like I said, sometimes you just have life experience, some wisdom along the way that to just share with that I wish I had someone to share with me, with that 24-year-old girl, because I do think, that's young. That's really young when, and
Yeah.
and life hits you and a lot of things hit you. And how are you going to do this? That I had somebody to speak into my life.
Right.
And I think this is the opportunity that I see and that I understand, to have this platform to say, you can work through it. If you're committed, you can work through it. You can get yourself through anything. Put your mind to it. Surround yourself with great people.
Mm-hmm.
Surround yourself with people that will speak into your life and give you the wisdom that you need in order to go through the things that you go through. Because marriage isn't easy.
Right.
Like, marriage isn't, for the ones that think that you're going to be married and it's going to be a fairy tale and happily ever after. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, and there is a happily ever after, but there's some in between moments that you have to work through to get to the happily ever after.
So true.
So I just think, listening to it, it just kind of like solidified some things within me of what I was thinking of being on the right track, because it is to bring content to the people. It is to have, it's not just to talk and say a lot and say nothing. It's really to talk and talk about the real things that are happening in the marriages. In relationships, in self-development, self-growth, in growth in the relationship. There's one thing. Was my takeaway that I was going to share with you too. Was it this one? I'm almost certain it was her that said, everyone right now is totally on the wagon of self-development, self-help, just like being the best version of yourself. It's all self. The focus is on self. And that's true to a point.
To a point, right.
But then there's a point that you're in this marriage together. And yes, you do need to develop and get, yourself in a state that when you're together, you're the best. The both of you are the best. However, what she was saying, that the focus so much has been on self, it really hasn't been on the relationship.
Right.
Like you're not, even though you're working on yourself, you're not working on relationship things like communication, intimacy, your sex life, your day-to-day things to deal with, your kids. It's like none of that stuff in the relationship is being dealt with because everybody's so consumed with dealing with their own issues,
Right.
their own stuff, being their best version of themselves. I'm not saying that that's bad, because that is a huge part of coming in, and this is me. This is what I have to bring to the table. But there's another element there I think sometimes that is missed, and that is working on the actual relationship. What does it take to be married?
Right.
What does it take to be in this relationships? What are the things that we need to do as a couple, as we come together as a couple? What are those things that we need to work on?
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing for me, because I know you and I talk so much about, self-development, being emotionally, having emotional intelligence, being, what is it that you're bringing to the table, that you're a whole person, the best version of yourself shows up. We're all about that. But I think sometimes you miss that element of, we need to get back to the basics and talk about the marriage.
Yes.
Because that's what we're here about.
Very
That's
true.
That's the thing that I said, and I set out that this is the thing I would like to talk about. This is what I have to offer.
Yeah.
And to get back to that, the marriage element, the marriage aspect of man versus marriage.
Yeah.
So that was my take. That was long-winded, but that was my take.
No, and it's, you know what? It's just great to hear from you, to sit and hear from you about what is on your mind, what's on your heart, what is your takeaway from these, because you have so much to give. You're such a finely tuned expert at what you do. I'm telling you, we've said, Jeannie and I have said this for a long time. We don't know what shape our marriage would be in if it weren't for you and what you did to invest time and energy into us. It takes a willing couple of people to do something, but for you to be as selfless as you have to pour into our marriage, you're an expert, an absolute expert at what you do. And it's just great to hear what's on your mind and your heart.
Right.
We need to hear more of it in this Man versus Marriage platform, because the way we started this was, it was like foundational principles of laying the foundation of how to become a better person and how to become a better husband to your wife.
Right.
And we laid all those things out. And then, we got into we started kind of skating around some of the issues that were going on in my life and the state of the union and all that type of stuff, and then we kind of got into some of the work stuff. But and Jeannie and I kind of had it out in front of you at one point.
Right.
Because we were talking about what her place would be in this podcast. And she didn't feel comfortable with things being said, and she wasn't here, to kind of set the story straight. If that's not the way that
Her
that
version.
her version. But what we discussed then and what we've discussed since is I've got a right to put my version out of what I believe things are. And if she hears it and she disagrees with it, she's got a right to come here and say, this is
Absolutely.
actually not it. And I'm open to that, and there are certain things in our marriage, like every marriage, that are off limits to talk about.
Absolutely.
And that's personal and intimate.
Yes.
But as it relates to communication, comprehension, growth in myself, or obstacles that I'm putting out in our marriage that I'm not aware of, or how I'm taking stuff, those are the things that are important to get back into talking about. One of the listeners, that got with us and said, "Hey, I spent a long time being dishonest
Right.
in my relationship, and now I'm starting to be honest, but she's not having it." And kind of going back to the beginning to say, okay, well, what are you willing to accept as your responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you willing to do to move forward? And what conversation are you willing to have to ask her what her expectations are, instead of just assuming you might know that?
Right.
Those are the discussions we need to get into, and those are, it takes a lot of time and energy and commitment to just put yourself out there. Because I could just skate over the details,
Because it's so easy to do.
It's easy. That part's easy. And that's like we were talking about before. It's like I've decided to be more vulnerable, like we've talked about, and tell people not what my mindset is, because I thoroughly believe that's my mindset, but just to share that vulnerable side of me, to say, hey, this is what's going on. And not everybody knows how to take it. Maybe because I've built an expectation of how or what they should expect when they're talking to me. And there was nothing fake about that, because it was where my mind was. I don't want to burden people with my problems.
Right.
And then, you being the excellent listener and coach that you are, is like, well, who said that? And I'm like, I don't know. And I was really self-conscious listening to these episodes, and you asking me questions and me saying, I don't know. It's never a cop-out.
No, I know that.
It's not a cop-out to say I don't know, because I want to give the true answer of what it is and put it out there, no matter how ugly it is. Otherwise, it ain't helping nobody.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm here. I want to help people in their relationship. And yes, it does start by transforming yourself, but if we become so self-focused, like you're saying, that we completely forget about this relationship that now is a living and breathing entity,
Right.
it could grow in opposite directions.
See, I think too, when two people are not on board in self-development, like, okay, I'll just take my husband and I as an example. If it sways one way, it sways on my side. I'm doing self-development. I'm improving. I'm, getting a different perspective. And he is just doing nothing. Pretty soon, you will self-develop your way out of the relationship, because it sways one way.
Yeah.
So if this one person on this side isn't on that same mindset of improving and of developing themselves, you can sway that one way where you literally will just move on, because this person isn't willing to develop and to move and to mature as your relationship is growing.
Yeah.
And you could literally self-develop yourself right out of a relationship.
Ooh.
So it's you really have to think about that. And that was something that my husband had brought up to me. He goes, I can see that as being an issue in marriages because self-development is so huge right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not talking and communicating and you're not in that relationship, developing that relationship, and you're just developing yourself,
Right. And that's why I think it's important to take our whole body of work and what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're asking you, what do you want?
Right.
We're asking you, what do you want? If you're not satisfied with the relationship and you just want to develop yourself out of it, that's up for you to decide.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt like, we've been beating that drum for a long time. That's what's caused me all these, I don't want to call them issues, all these adventures, or I don't care, all this crap, is deciding, well, what the heck do I want? Because I live by the crap I say.
Right.
All this stuff, it's not like I'm just trying to drum up content to get an episode done.
That's funny.
It's
yeah,
not,
who
it's not
does
like,
that?
It's like, if that's what you
if
expect.
that's your motive.
If that is what you believe this to be, no, it's not. I'm not just trying to create episodes. I'm really freaking putting my life out here and what I'm going through, because I've had this belief for a long time that if people can look at me and all of the circumstances that surround me, with, just early on, having a son who's born hard of hearing. Mm-hmm. He's not deaf. He's not hearing. He's hard of hearing. He's in two separate lands.
Right.
And then having triplets who, for the first few months of their life, were in incubators and intensive care. Mm-hmm. And then, we had one that was fully cooked. Great. And then having twins in the same circumstance.
Right.
And then having seizures and multiple brain surgeries and all these things that I could just quit. I could just quit and go do something new with someone else. Or my wife could just quit. She could walk away.
And people would totally understand.
People would understand. It's just too much.
Right.
But if you look at all these, there's no game plan for watching your child flatline on a table in a trauma room in a hospital. There's no game plan for that.
Nope.
But if people can look at my life, I'm sure they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm not that guy. And at the same time, I'm so happy to be this guy. I'm so happy to have this life and to have the kids that I have and the wife that I have. If they can look at me in that situation and say, I can't believe this guy is still going. What are my excuses? Because I'll look to relatable situations that way, and that's how I guess I'm wired, is if things are tough, I try to rally myself and look and say, well, heck, if this person was able to do this, I can find this within me to go, no matter how hard it is. It doesn't mean you don't stumble and fall flat on your face and have to get up and dress your wounds and shake yourself off and clear your head and figure out where the ground is. Let the dust settle, but you keep moving.
Right.
And I don't want all these circumstances coming into my life and creating all these different issues.
Right.
But it's life. And in some version, it's happening to everybody that lives it because it's life.
Right.
And I want to be a person people can look at to be encouraged and believe that they can just take one more step forward. And that is important to me. I don't know why it's important to me. I don't understand where it came from. Maybe I just know that I needed it to get through some of these things. It was the same way with my weight loss.
Right.
If all this is happening and I can still get healthy, then maybe people would be bold enough to lay down their own excuses and go for it. And that's where that's kind of listening to what they said. It's like just pour yourself into the content. Put yourself out there. Life is not this Instagram style
Not at all.
everything's happy all the time. That's not what life is.
Yeah.
Life is hard, but it's rewarding. Life is hard. You get out of it what you put into it. Good things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. And the opposite is true. Bad things happen to good people. But you have a whole lot better chance of good things happening if you know what's right. Just do it and go that way.
Right.
And that's kind of where I find myself now, is that it's like there's nothing I'm gonna hold back from this show, because it's developing the platform that I see within myself, that if I can expand my voice and put my journey out there, that it will encourage some people not to give up.
Right.
It will encourage some men and women out there to say, this guy has a good life, but he's had some really tough things. And I believe if he can do it, I can do it too.
Right.
And maybe I can become somebody that people can look at to garner some kind of hope, or to build some kind of hope in their life to take another step.
Right.
And that's the effect that we want to have here on people's lives, so that they're, no matter what you're going through, just take another step.
Right.
Just move forward again. And then equip yourself. Learn how you handle things. Learn what you're not good at handling so you can prepare yourself.
Right.
But don't, I guess I'm saying this for me, I don't want to self-develop myself out of my marriage. And it's hard when the other person's not doing it. It's hard when you message it the wrong way.
Right.
Like when you say, well, I'm just too hard-headed to give up. That can be taken the wrong way.
Right.
And I've had a problem with trying to say the right thing at the wrong time. Heck, I am the master of it, as a matter of fact. But the principles that we started with, and where we're going in this show, and doing so much live coaching, this is all in the effort to make sure the listener knows that there is a possibility for something better.
Right.
But it's up to them to decide what it is.
And we have the opportunity to show them the better. We have the opportunity to give them a roadmap.
Yes.
We have the opportunity to give them the tools, some wisdom, some guidance. It's using this platform as that, and like what you were saying, in just life, and just living life, and things happening, good or bad. It's the quote that Ed Milet says, it's coming to a place and understanding, and this totally has transformed my life, is you look at it as this is happening for me and not to me. And I think if you can take away anything from what we're saying today and really just meditate on that you could look back, you might not have all the answers to it, but if you can look at it that this is happening for me and not to me, your whole outlook on things will be so different, because you'll look for the good in what it is that's something out of a really bad, because all of us have some really bad circumstances that have happened in our lives, that we could look at it and say, this was for me. I might not understand it all right now, but I'm going to believe that this is for me. And I'm going to come out being a better person. I'm going to come out being a stronger person. I'm going to come out being more dedicated, more, you just kind of take the victim mentality off of, this is how always happens to me. These things just always come my way. You take away that victim mindset, and this is a more empowering mindset to say, this is happening for me, and I'm going to take everything for it, for what it is, and I'm going to come out on the other side and be a better person.
Right.
And it's just having that outlook. It's having that courage to see things in life that way.
Absolutely.
And it just turns the filter that you just believe life is happening to you.
Yeah.
And life is living you instead of you living life.
Yeah.
It's just putting things a little bit more into perspective.
Right. And I think I would say this, and this is how I've identified it in my life. If you have that thing going on in your head where something comes up and it's like, oh, here we go again, you are really stuck in that things are happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
Why are things happening to me?
Right.
And I go back to that saying, and I just went back to it, a day ago to tell Jeannie, it's like, I can't wait to see how this situation that's happening right now is happening for me.
Right.
I can't wait to see how this works out.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I believe it's going to work out great.
Right.
But I can't wait to see how it's working out for me, and I want to maintain that mindset. And I'm okay to share that now with my wife
Mm-hmm.
when I'm struggling to see it that way. You
Right.
know? And it's weird because sometimes I get in the habit of when somebody's kind of trying to be vulnerable and tell me some problems in their life, it's like, I'm going to combat that with positivity. So it's like, oh man, I just had my leg chopped off. Hey, good thing you got another leg. It's like, who the crap needs to hear that right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I only know that because I was kind of being vulnerable with somebody, and it's like, oh. It's like, okay, I know I've done that way too much in the past, and I
Mhm.
need to gauge myself.
Right.
It's like, hey, this is what's happening. Gosh, that sucks.
It's having the empathy and compassion with the person that's standing in front of you to identify that they're going through something really tough.
I agree, and I also believe this now, being kind of getting the perspective on it. It's also, having enough growth in your life to understand that people do need a minute to let it sink in that something hard's going
Yeah.
on, and they just need somebody who cares about it.
To listen.
They don't need somebody all the time. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes it's like, hey, wake the F up, dude. You've been complaining about this long enough.
Right.
But it's not the majority is not that time when somebody's decided to be vulnerable with you and say, hey, this is hard. They don't
Right.
need that positive, don't worry, the sun's coming up and there's unicorns. That's not what's needed,
Uh-huh.
at least in my experience, because when I'm trying to be somewhat vulnerable, I just want to know that you freaking care. And there's time for, hey man, let's get up and go for this.
Exactly.
There's time for it. If it's an automatic response, then what the heck are you hiding? If it's an automatic response, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid that somebody is going to have a low moment and they won't be able to get through it? It's really
Right.
what am I afraid
What
of
are you?
in me?
What's going on inside of you?
Right? So it's like, okay, have a moment, dude. Allow yourself the opportunity to have a moment and say, this really sucks.
Right.
I'm not going to stay there. It's like taking a knee. I'm not going to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get up after, in time for the 10 count, and I'm going to keep moving on.
Right.
Just a weird little moment for me, I guess. It's a big deal to me because I've done a lot of combating negative with positive, but there's a time and place for it.
Mm-hmm.
And people just need to know that you care. When I'm putting myself out there, I just need to know that you care. And I haven't been open with my wife about that
Mm-hmm.
until the last few weeks of these episodes and putting it out there, because what we talk about, I just go and put into practice.
Right.
Let's go do it.
Right.
And my wife stepped up to the table. She stepped on the table. She put on a cape. She put on some kind of a sword. I don't know. And you know what she did? She used all of my words to encourage me and then tell me how she believes in me.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have given her that opportunity in the past.
Right.
Or I would have shut her down and say, yeah, I know all that. I know all that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I started to go there. in my mind and kind of flipped the switch off. Just let her talk. It's like, no, wait. You've always wanted her to do this. You've wanted the opportunity to do this for her. So shut your freaking mind off and allow her to rise to the moment for you. And I did. And she went so far to build me up and to tell me the confidence that she had in me. And it changed me as a person in that moment.
Right.
You know, it was big. It was a big deal. And it lets me know that, you know, she's in this thing with me.
Right.
And she heard me, and she said, it's like, I hear you and I understand. I'm sorry, but don't forget this. And it was just well timed. And if I would have kept the wall up or not allowed myself to be vulnerable and accept it, I would have missed out on like some step forward in growth in our relationship.
Right.
And I'm glad that I did, because it just brought us closer together, you know? It made our friendship bond stronger.
Right.
Because I'm kind of going through hell right now. But it's all right, because it's like we can get through all this together.
Right.
You know, and it was great. So you're cheating yourself.
That is so true.
You're cheating yourself out of something if you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable in front of the right people. Because you need it. We need it. We need to know somebody out there gives a damn about what we're going through.
Right.
And if you try to do it all on your own, at some point you're going to self-destruct. Or maybe you're so successful at it that your wife and kids don't know you anymore, and your relationship goes away. And then it's like, why did you start this in the first place?
Right.
So it was a great moment for me. It helped me rise up, and then it's helped her and I to have these no rules conversations where it's like, who said there were rules, and why should we have to walk on eggshells with one another? And I mean, I've got a great example that this episode's going long, so we can cut it, but I got a great example of how I just wasn't buying into the no rules conversation and getting huffy, you know, getting an attitude and irritated when it's like, this is you, it ain't her, you idiot. So why not acknowledge it? Why not acknowledge it and move along? You know, it's a great journey, and I didn't set out to cry on this microphone today.
That's all good.
But it is what it is, and I'm okay with putting me out there, because I just want you guys, gals, to know that we really mean it when we say, how good do you want your life to be? How good?
Absolutely.
We never said, how easy do you want your life? It seems like the things that are the most rewarding take the most work.
Yeah.
But there's a payoff. You know, what are you willing to do for the payoff? And that's what we're doing here. We're not just drumming up content for another episode. We're well over 1,000 downloads now, which is really exciting to me. We met the goal in under a year, Coach.
Right.
Our goal was to hit 52 episodes and get to that 1,000 download mark, and we cruised right past it. Like 16 countries people are listening to Man vs. Marriage. I never had a thought that somebody in Ireland,
Me neither.
or Switzerland, and China, or France, the Netherlands, Australia, the UK. It never crossed my mind that in less than a year's time, people would hear what we have to say, and it would make an impact on their life globally. And really, you know, you tread on some uneasy ground if you're doing this and you're getting so caught up in the downloads. It's like running your life on likes on Instagram or Facebook. It's just not. It's not what life is about. But you have to have some goals, and you got to be in it to win it. And there's things that you need to achieve in life if you're, looking for success. And I'm proud to say that, what we're doing is helping people, and it's going a long way. And I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud of what we're doing. And it's an honor to sit across the table from you, Coach, and to share this platform with you. And I just look forward to doing it in greater ways.
Right back at you.
Thank you.
I feel the same way. Definitely.
Well, we're going to wrap this episode up right now. And thank you for listening. And we sure appreciate you being here and hearing us out. And if you have any questions or feedback, go ahead and email us at coach@manvsmarriagepodcast.com. Join us on the Facebook group at MVSM Podcast. And I got to tell you, we got some things going on with the website now where we're boosting that up and making some changes and just, improving it like we like to improve ourselves and our marriage. And it's looking pretty cool. So go check out manvsmarriagepodcast.com and let us know what you think. It looks really good, and we're going to infinity and beyond. Until the next episode, good night now.
The podcast.
How good do you want your life to be?
It's truly about becoming the best version of yourself that's possible.
This is Man vs. Marriage.
The podcast.